Today, Dave Madden, the guy who watched the Titanfall-Mt Dew-Doritos launch nearly combust on impact and still kept his sanity. He's here to explain why gaming folks think ad tech is full of vaporware, why most innovation is just reheated leftovers, and what actually matters when everything goes sideways. It's blunt, it's wild, and yes, he names names. This is the ADOTAT Show.
Hey everyone, I'm Pesach Latin, host of the ADOTAT Show, where we take the shiny buzzwords of ad tech, toss them in a blender, and see what's actually drinkable. Today I'm with Dave Madden, the guy who helped build modern in-game advertising, ran global brand deals at EA, and is now back with Alex St. John to flip the script again with Playcast.io. Buckle up, this one's about the future of gaming, discovering, and why bad ads deserve to die. First of all, the main question, how are you, Dave?
Oh, I'm great today. Happy to be on with you after watching so many of your other interviews.
So you've reunited with Alex St. John after decades apart. It's a little like if Jobs and Woz got back together, but with a little bit more GPUs and fewer black turtleturnecks.
Yeah.
Tell me about this reunion. Why this moment? And what possessed you to try to reinvent gaming again?
Well, I don't know if it'll ever reach the Jobs and Woz status, but thank you for that. Alex is a really interesting guy, and we had so much fun at WildTangent in 2000 to 2010 together, and did a lot of firsts. And his just creativity and brain power excite me. It's fun to be around him and try and break things, and that's what he's really good at. And he'd spent the last couple years basically in a barn with a bunch of PhDs building a new technology platform for kind of the next generation of gaming and where it's all going. And I'd been advising him a little bit and put a little money into it, and decided to jump fully on board after I got a demo from him down at Unreal Fest in Orlando this year, and just was like, wow, this can really change a lot of things about game discovery in the industry.
So Playcast.io is a venture with St. John, as we mentioned, and it's the first user-generated cloud game platform that allows anyone to publish, stream, and monetize their own games instantly. When you talk about user-generated cloud games, do you mean true peer-to-peer experiences or a curated sandbox with creative freedom?
Yeah, so, I mean, all that's to be determined. This is, pretty early days, but the gist of the idea is that video games are going to be streamed, just like video became streamed. And, video games today are largely still a download games business. If you're picking up a mobile game on your cell phone, you go to an app store and you download it. If you're playing a game on PlayStation or Xbox, you're downloading that, to your hardware. And certainly PC games are primarily being downloaded out of game stores like the Epic Game Store and the Steam Game Store. So the industry for video games really hasn't gotten to that state that the videos have, where you've got, Netflix and HBO Max and YouTube TV and YouTube, and all the content is streaming to you as opposed to, downloaded or progressively downloaded content. And the video game industry, there's some pretty big players attempting to broaden that perspective of cloud gaming to people's end devices without having to download the content, but the economics are pretty difficult to imagine scaling anytime soon, given just the huge cost of delivering a video game from the cloud to an individual machine. And so the idea here is we really build out a peer-to-peer network of PC games or PC devices that are hosting games and make those games streamable like a local area network type model.
So we're going back to LAN games, you said?
Well, the idea of a co-op game, so, couch
right.
co-op. I remember when Call of Duty Zombies mode came out, and so I watch my kids with their friends sit on the couch and pass the controllers back and forth and couch co-op Call of Duty, which is pretty fun. And there was news today, I think, or yesterday, that Netflix has launched a bunch of couch co-op games, kind of family-friendly Lego games and some other couch co-op games. And I think this is a trend you're going to see, which is people playing games together, sitting on a couch. But from our point of view, that couch could be 1,000 miles apart. You don't have to be sitting next to someone to play in a game with them. And games like Fortnite have clearly showed that. But the opportunity we see happening is reducing the cost associated with making that play possible.
If last touch attribution worked, your waiter would get full credit for the meal. We make sure the chef gets credit too. Incremental.
And just to give you an idea, if you want to host a game in the cloud with AWS or any other of the big hosting services, the monthly fee to have one of those machines, a gaming machine sitting in the cloud that can then deliver a game down to, one player or a group of players on one game together is not trivial. So much so that I think, even Google looked at their Stadia business model and said, we could probably make more money from our cloud infrastructure, renting it out to other things like AI instead of trying to run a consumer cloud gaming service out of it. So Playcast, what we're really trying to do is bring those costs down to essentially zero, or really the cost of recruiting people to become hosts for a gaming node network.
So you built WildTangent when broadband was barely breathing. What did that era teach you about surviving hype cycles and latency nightmares?
Yeah, it was a golden age in gaming, really. If you look at what took place, in the turn of the century, it's amazing.
It's hard to say when I say
that's crazy, right?
I still think that means 1900.
Wouldn't that be nice? The game industry really, there were some interesting technologies like Flash that allowed for sort of instant gameplay or near instant gameplay in a browser. But by and large, video games were being downloaded with things like, if you remember, Real Networks was originally called Progressive Networks. So they had built technology for you to instantiate a download. Then while you were using that media, and it could be video games, that the rest of the game would be brought to you in the background. So that was kind of the invention in the early 2000s, was progressive downloading in big files, which included gaming's always the best industry to launch new technology with, because people are always going to look for the fastest, best outcomes, when they're playing games.
Yeah, gamers have no patience.
No patience at all. And so
the loading screen, if the loading screen is too long, that will give it 3 instead of 4 stars.
Right. And if you look at the mobile game space, originally it was AT&T and Verizon putting games on the phone when you bought it. It came with like a bunch of games preloaded. But by the 2010, 2015 era, all games were being just brought dynamically to you when you went to the App Store, and they came down to your phones pretty quickly in the background. That's the kind of what's exciting about video games, and why we launched WildTangent was to help people get a lot of games on their machines. We actually launched a game service that shipped with every PC manufacturer out of the factory. We preloaded games on the machine, but then you could go click on games and have them download in the background. And so we ended up with hundreds of games in our service from a lot of the most popular game developers like PopCap back in the day. Plants vs. Zombies, everybody knows that game. It was a really good one. Or Bejeweled, Collapse was another one. So all those games were really popular back then. And then you had this explosion of mobile gaming that really made everybody a gamer. And during that whole process, we invented the rewarded ad at WildTangent. We actually invented, at least for the, North America, maybe the Western Hemisphere, digital currency called Wild Coins that we launched in the early 2000s that let people pay for game sessions like they were at an arcade. So we took these download games, which normally cost $10 to $20 each, and we let people play them for a coin or two, which was like equivalent of 25 cents to 50 cents. And then we let advertisers sponsor that. So you could just, instead of paying coins, you could watch an ad to get, an unlimited session of gameplay across your favorite game. So it was pretty creative, pretty inventive stuff back then. And we also, I'm super excited about what's going on Fortnite, UEFN, their Fortnite Islands, and Roblox, with brands building experiences now. But we were doing some of the craziest advert games with Nike and Coke and Pepsi and Visa back then, where the budgets just went through the roof, and super fun. Like the Nike World Cup football, aka soccer game that we created called Nike Scorpion Knockout, was a massive global hit. So much so it shut Nike's servers in China down because so many people in China tried to play it all at once. It was just crazy. Today you see sites like properties like Roblox have really created a really nice platform for that stuff to flourish, and for brands to finally have an avenue where they can scale, their experiences in gaming efficiently against users. But we were pioneering all that stuff in the early 2000s.
So if cloud gaming goes mainstream, which type of company will get left behind? The console makers, the ad middlemen, or the gatekeepers at app stores?
Yeah, well, the App Store thing is moving pretty quickly right now. Epic Games really, one
Lawsuit, yeah.
lawsuit that was fairly earth-shaking, and I think only someone like Tim Sweeney, who's got such a driven personality to not cave in. Basically, he won the App Store ruling over Apple and then Google. So now you're going to see app stores flourish everywhere, web stores anyway, which creates a lot more agency for content producers, but also for end consumers. But to your larger question, the TV set today without a console attached to it is becoming a pretty good gaming device. The Samsungs and LGs and Vizios are building app stores and game services on platform. And if you have a good internet connection and you use a cloud gaming service that ships with those TVs like an NVIDIA GeForce Now or Microsoft's Game Pass, you can have a pretty darn good experience. It might not be tournament worthy. You may not want to enter a esports tournament from your TV set in your living room, but if you're jumping in to play Fortnite with friends, it's probably pretty good. So it does lead to questions about what becomes of the console cycle. It really feels like Microsoft is leaning into cloud, and they've made some pretty aggressive moves in terms of acquiring studios to fill their coffers in their cloud gaming offering, which is, we got a lot of amazing content in it now with their acquisition of Activision and a pretty big library, which they've really raised the prices on, which indicates even when you're one of the hyperscalers and you own the cloud, it's still not inexpensive to do. But that might be an indication that they're maybe not leaning into a next gen console. They're more leaning into their strength, which is cloud. Seems like Sony, has done really, really well in this current generation of consoles, as well as Nintendo. So I don't think you would say consoles are out, but it remains to be seen if there's a next gen box that sits in the living room per se, or if the consoles are moving more towards flexible handhelds like the Steam Deck or the Logitech G Cloud and things of that nature, or Nintendo for that matter.
So I want you to manifest the dream before Reddit rewrites it. If you could teleport to 2035 and get Playcast's Wikipedia entry, what do you want the headline to say, and what would it probably say?
I mean, I think for Playcast, and it's early, so I don't want to get too crazy and aspirational, but Alex is a big thinker, and we think it's just creating access to unlimited gameplay, and as a result of that, unlimited game creativity, democratizing access to games across any device, which then opens up much more player-friendly business models than the current, pay me $30 a month to get access to a library of games, which is, pretty daunting for most consumers and maybe not the most player-friendly approach across the board. And we just think games are going to be instantly discoverable, whether you're on your cell phone, you're on your TV set, you're on an airplane, and you want to play with friends, which, thing about gaming is yes, you can play solo games, but it's just much more fun when you're playing with friends. And, so we just think we're going to help expand the surfaces and the ease of access to get in and play games instantly with friends or with random strangers.
Okay, so moving on, you've called ad tech brutally self-promotional before.
Did I?
Why does this industry keep buying its own snake oil, and how do you avoid slipping on the grease?
Yeah. Well, I'll take a giant step backwards and say, I've pretty much always been focused on how do you make advertising user-friendly, or in the case of video games.
Built revenue systems that actually work. That's my note under this.
Yeah. So,
And your Substat rants, I went through them. You talk a lot about performative innovation where you have proof, not pitch decks.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of vaporware, out there.
Well, now with AI, 100%.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess what I was trying to say about advertising in general in the industry is that, there's a lot of hype, and there's a lot of frosting gets put on a cake that's already baked. So, the supply of inventory or the supply of content that advertising can get involved with is fairly limited to, some pretty big entities that control a lot of the creation of that content and distribution of the content. And then what you end up with is an industry of, I don't know, like almost like, hangers on. What's it called? What's the little, is it krill that sits on the back of a whale when they're swimming through the water? Or is it krill what they feed on? Whatever sits on the back of a whale.
Lampreys?
What's
the
that?
Lampreys.
Yeah, sure. So an industry of lampreys that are sitting on...
suck on them, right? And
yeah, exactly.
Eat all the, yeah.
And, we get on airplanes and we fly to Cannes, France to have meetings and then post on social media about how impactful those meetings were when the people that we're meeting with are like sometimes 20 minutes away down the street. But as an industry, we feel a need to sort of have these, I don't know, these overly important meetings where we're
Well, it's the
saving the
15
world.
white guys talking about diversity.
Exactly. And but at the same time, though, like this, there's not that much that, as so much of the ad business is second and third party, and they don't really control the inventory. So you're trying to add value on top of somebody else's business, and so that's where it gets to me. It gets a little bit dodgy, and maybe in some cases not even that ethical. But I think over time that probably shakes out okay. But I think there's part of the challenge is there's just so much incentive around, it's kind of supporting the pre-existing tent poles that exist that you end up with, money not always being spent in the best way.
Speaking of conferences, which phrase from conferences deserves immediate execution? Metaverse, AI native, or data-driven empathy?
Wow. It's, metaverse has got a bad rap for sure. And I'm not even sure how you define the metaverse, but I wouldn't count that one out because, the stuff that's going on with glasses and everything else, maybe there's something that emerges there, but all, sort of data-driven hype is a little, it's an easy thing to throw out there. We're data-driven, we make data-driven decisions, everything we do is data-driven. Sure, but I don't know if it, needs its own category and to be used ad nauseum.
Forced to be a little creative here. If you were forced to pitch an obviously bogus product on stage just to prove a point, what would the product be? And if it gets funded, you get bonus points.
Wow, this is probably the part where in the interview I go, I have no idea what you're talking about. Give me a break. But a product that could get funded and that I could pitch on stage and that I would find really interesting is probably that the ability to take yourself out of the physical world and drop yourself into an imaginary 3D world where you're running around and doing stuff. And I know that's that's been the wish and dream of books, and people sometimes call it the metaverse. It almost feels like a dream, but I just feel like with all the stuff that's going on right now with robotics and the 3D technology and the glasses. I mean, I can't wear a headset. I get completely nauseous and sick in that stuff. But
yeah, I can't do it either. My kids love it. I throw up.
Yeah. I think there's something about running around in a 3D world as a character is really amazing. I don't think it's happened yet, but I can't imagine it won't happen in our lifetime.
Yeah, my kids like box. It's hilarious. Like they're in the living room just boxing.
And they've got the full headsets on and they're not throwing up when they're done. Yeah, that's wild. I can't imagine that.
So you've said that your mentor, Duke Stump, taught you the soul of a brand. In an era where authenticity is overused as innovation, how do you keep a brand soul alive without turning into marketing cosplay?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know that I would let him know that I consider him a mentor. I'll never hear the end of that. Duke and I met.
He was with Lululemon. He's got
a great
Lime,
career.
I think.
He was original Nike Eakins. So Eakins were a group that would go into the running stores in the early Nike days when Nike was really a running company. And I met him. Right. I was at Runner's World magazine. I met him at the LA Marathon Expo.
Oh yeah, I forgot you're a runner.
Well, not anymore, but the knees don't love it. Anyway, Duke was Eakins would go into the running stores and they all got tattoos with it's Nike spelled backward was Eakin. And there's like a dozen of them around the States that would go in and go into these kind of vertical running stores, mom and pop shops, and convince them to carry the latest Nike stuff. And Duke went on to have great marketing jobs at Nike, and then he was a CMO of Bauer Hockey. He was a great college hockey and post-college hockey player. And then he went on to Lulu and was a chief brand officer there, and then started a thing called the Bonfire, which was really about the soul of brands. And now he's with a really cool Ojai-based company called Tractor Beverages, which is trying to make, healthier soda and bubbly drinks. But, he what I always loved about Duke was he really gets to the core premise of the brand and kind of shies away from all the fluffy stuff. And the campaign that I really think to me kind of really showed how you think differently about brands was when he was at Lulu, and I think he got in a lot of almost got fired for this one, or certainly his job was it was a hot seat campaign because it was so different. Lulu, if you think of Lulu and the brand, he hired Vice Media at the time, who had like an ad agency division, and they built much more gritty, inner city, diverse, darker kind of palette, series of commercials. It was really about broadening the audience for Lululemon apparel and the uses of it. And it had a very different feel than what you would have expected from Lulu at the time. And it ended up really creating a tremendous trajectory for the brand and broadening their audience and who might be interested in it. But I think, when he did it, he took a lot of heat for straying so far from what people might have considered the brand to be. And I just thought it was really daring. He walked me through the whole thought process on it, how risky it was, how it could have cost him his job if sales didn't go up. And, but he was very true to what he thought the brand should be and how it should be out in the marketplace. And he's just continued to be that kind of a person who isn't in it for the trips to Cannes and the adoration. It's really about the soul of the brand.
So if every brand had to earn soul points before launch, who would be excommunicated first?
I don't know. Give me an example of you think of, I don't know if I want to get called out on that. What do you think would be a brand that would, jump out at you? Tesla?
They've done they're actually hiring, I think, a CMO finally.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you could almost go every car company you could say, like, they came out with some
there's been
wacky,
a period where they just were just
like the
horribly.
Jaguar. I think the Jaguar ones that were so off-brand for Jaguar recently was probably a great example of a car company just completely missing even who their next generation customer might be.
Who owns Jaguar? Are they still owned by Ford or whatever?
I don't think so.
They've changed hands so many times. I don't even know who owns them.
Yeah, they got crushed by that. So. Yeah, I mean, sometimes the risk pays off. Like maybe at the end of the day, they say, what doesn't matter. We got so much press out of it that people weren't even thinking about Jaguar. Now they checked us out. So I guess maybe there is no.
Yeah, the only Jaguars I ever see are the self-driving cars.
Self-driving, right? Yeah,
that's the only Jaguars I ever see. I don't think and I'm in Phoenix. We got a lot of sports cars and Lamborghinis and stuff, but I never see the Jaguars.
Yeah, I know they're in San Fran. I've taken those at conferences. They're great. Nice car. It's kind of weird when you get in the back seat though, and whoa, where am I going?
If you could bring one dead brand back to life for its original soul, who would you resurrect?
Dead brand back to life for its original soul. Boy, that's a good one.
And why is it not Jolt?
Remind me what Jolt was. Was that?
Not a gamer then. Jolt was an old school 1990s highly caffeinated Coca-Cola product.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That gamers and hackers started drinking in the 90s.
So Molson had a great...
Kids started going to the hospital with heart palpitations.
So I was just texting... I do not I do remember Jolt. I mean, yeah. All the energy drinks with young kids is probably not always the best idea.
And this is before all the current energy drinks. But it was just load as much caffeine into one bottle as possible.
Yeah, the drinking age was at 18 when I started, when I was growing up, not to age myself. And I used to go up to the Thousand Islands on the St. Lawrence River with some high school buddies. And we take his Boston Whaler over to Canada and get the Molson Bredor. Molson had a higher alcohol content beer called Bredor. And so we would make these trips just to go over to Canada to get the Bredor. And they canceled that. I'm pretty sure they canceled that a bunch of years ago, but that'd be I don't really drink much, but if I did, I would definitely love to have a Bredor. It was
so you've argued for years that gamers don't hate ads. They hate being treated like captive audiences. How does the industry keep missing this painfully obvious truth?
Part of the challenge on just the whole idea of ads in games is it's actually by and large counter the industry's major thrust, which is efficiency of inventory at scale. And, typically when you look at how ads are being delivered globally and at scale, it's not really necessarily user friendly. I mean, there have been some things that have developed over time where the experience is more interwoven into what you're doing. So I would look at like Instagram and TikTok and say, you know what? They've done a pretty good job of making ads part of your feed, making it easy to avoid ads if you don't want them, and then also doing a pretty good job of making the ads, if you opt into targeting, making the ads relatively personalized for you. So there are platforms that have done a really good job, but in general, most advertising that's digitally delivered is often interruptive. I always get a kick out of like the game trades who will write a story about how bad game advertising or in-game advertising is. The ones that the ones that are sort of like to be the industry pundits. Right. You go to their website to read the article, you literally can't get through the webpage because it's like littered with those
pop-ups
ads
and every takeovers.
how can you write an article about how ads are, are bad when you're actually have like literally the worst user experience? So, the thing is like that non-interruptive, giving players agency, putting them in charge of the experience. Like I always thought one of the best ad units was the ad selector that Spotify, I think Spotify came out with it first, or maybe Pandora, where you could kind of choose, or Hulu, you could choose which of the three ads you wanted to watch. Even if the ads weren't that great, it still gave you a sense of agency. Like I have some control over this experience versus, right now, if you jump into like, Amazon Prime and you're on an ad supported show, you might get hit with like 4 minutes of ads before you can watch a show. And that's just, it doesn't seem like it was well thought out in the design phase,
Going old school, what happened to skinning games?
Skinning
That's a great branding experience that no one does anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I think the closest thing to skinning games, and I think it's like super effective, is like light brand integration into games, which you're seeing more and more brands attempt this on Fortnite, UEFN, and really some of the bigger games on Roblox have done a really nice job of essentially skinning the game with brands that make sense. If you look at like the NASCAR, there's a NASCAR game on Roblox that a company called wildest produces, and they've done a nice job of integrating brands into that game in a super player-friendly way where it's not overwhelming. NASCAR experience, it works pretty well because, when you go watch a NASCAR event, there's a lot of brands involved in that experience. So I think certain games are perfect for that skinning. It's deeper than like a background billboard, but it's not so overwhelming that the brand becomes the game. And that's always been like when I was at EA, that was always a challenge, is how do you get a brand involved in a game like Madden, or what used to be called FIFA is now EAFC, in a way that's accretive to the experience, feels natural to the player, and it helps them along in kind of suspending reality and being in a 3D world, immersive world, playing a game without the brand pulling you out of that and making you feel like, oh, I'm being slapped in the face with something. So it's an art and a science, really.
So if you could run one perfect in-game ad that completely defined your career, what would it be?
Well, I'll tell you the one that was like definitely took the most work and I think really had the most wonderful outcome for the players. And these types of things are not like, I mean, I could easily say, well, just creating scalable ads that everybody can buy programmatically and that enhance the game. And, that's great. But we did a thing with FIFA. At the time, Coca-Cola was a big sponsor of the World Cup. And we actually worked with Coca-Cola. It took a couple years to put together because it's a global game, a global brand, and you have to get all the markets, kind of bought into it. But we actually built a whole sort of training mode in the game where you took on the persona of a player and a journey, if you will. It's like a 10-hour-long journey that was part of the game that you didn't have to play, but you could. And you went from playing a sort of junior league soccer to getting signed by, a top European club and signing a Coca-Cola sponsorship as part of it. And so we kind of wove the whole into the narrative of meeting with a Coca-Cola agent and signing with them. And then Coke put us on, I don't know, 1 billion cans around the world that had a code underneath it that unlocked certain benefits in the game that were brought to you by Coke. So it was sort of this, and they created TV commercials around it that ran when the game launched. And so players loved it. They ran out to the stores to buy these really unique Coke cans that had the FIFA character on the can. And a lot of them never even opened the can to get the code. They just wanted to have the can as like a keepsake. And what Coke got out of it was they became a big part of the story of the game, the story arc, where people would spend 10 hours essentially with their brand in the game, but never felt like you were playing an ad. You were just playing a character that got sponsored by Coke and then became a star on Manchester City. So it was, pretty cool outcome. I don't think you can do a lot of those because it involves a lot of lawyers and a lot of time, but that was absolutely incredible.
So you've been in the trenches of digital advertising for 2 decades. What is the hardest lesson you've learned, the one that cost sleep, cash, or faith, but taught you more than any success did?
Yeah, I would say the biggest learning I had that definitely had the potential to cost me sleep was this amazing program that we did with Pepsi together with Mountain Dew and Doritos. It's called The Power of One. Usually Call of Duty would have that program, and EA had purchased Respawn Studios. They had a game called Titanfall. So I don't know if you ever played Titanfall, but kind of
the Max.
Yep, exactly. And it was the team that ended up building Apex Legends which is what became of
Huge.
that studio.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Titanfall 2 was coming out, and we went and worked and kind of won that partnership with Pepsi. And right before the game was going to launch, there was some thought around continuing to improve the game before it launched, so delaying the launch of the game. But the problem was we had, in that case, hundreds of millions of packages of Doritos and Mountain Dew hitting retail shelves that had been 6 months in advance had been produced and built, and I was kind of caught in between the program going live and whether the game was going to get delayed. And I'm like, I don't know what happens if the game gets delayed and this stuff goes to retail. There's no game. That lesson taught me, like, create a more scalable, less high risk model. And that's when I launched Player One, which was a company that was really focused on making rewards dynamic inside of the game. So let a player interact with a brand and get that special unlock code auto dynamically delivered into their game without having to go to a retail store, buy a can or a package, and then log the code into a game site so they can get it on their console. Just make it all happen instantly over the airwaves, and engage with a brand while you're playing the game, and then they give you something of value. The equivalent of going to a store and buying a can, except instead of buying something, you're watching a 15 or 30-second video that they want you to watch, and they're giving you something in return for it in a console or PC game.
So do you think success in ad tech comes from genius, endurance, or just surviving long enough to recycle your ideas with a better UX?
Well, that's a fair question, because the core premise has not changed at all in gaming, and all the surveys. By the way, advertising in games performs better than any other medium by a really significant margin, and there's a simple reason why. Is that user has got their hands on a controller or on their cell phone. They're not actually multitasking when they're playing a game. They're solely focused on that gameplay experience. And as a result of that, brands can get super outsized results around awareness, intent, favorability. If they're adding value to gameplay experience, they're going to be really adding points to their favorability with end users. I think definitely ideas recycle. Roblox announced a few months ago that they were doing rewarded ads on Roblox, and I was amazed it took them years to get there, because it's clearly what their players need and want. So the idea is not new, but bringing it to new platforms is usually like a very, very long and arduous process, where the game developers and the game platforms tend to think ads are bad. We don't want to do ads. It's bad for gamers. Then they come to realize over time, oh no, if I give somebody something that they otherwise would have to buy in the game, I'll actually keep them around longer. They'll be happier with the game. And so I think you'll continue to see this model roll out. I mean, I think Microsoft, along with announcing a $30 highest tier now for cloud gaming, the rumor is, and it may have even happened this week in New York at Ad Week, I wasn't there, is that they're going to also announce, a ad-supported free or lower price tier. So the idea doesn't change. It's just the platforms that adopt it take, quite a long time. At Player One, we had launched with NVIDIA about a year and a half ago, that exact model. There's a free tier of their cloud gaming service, and we attached an ad model to it to help reduce the wait times and improve the experience, and players loved it. Players were going to be waiting in a queue to get into their free tier of cloud gaming, and we're happy to kind of watch a couple minutes of ads or a couple of ads on their way in. Well, they're seeing a queue saying you're 10 machines, 5 machines, okay, now you're in. So again, when you add value and the ads are at least appropriate for your audience, things tend to work out pretty well. And that hasn't changed since I've been doing it in 2000.
So I'm going to stick you on a desert island. You said you wanted to bring family and friends, but I'm not going to let you do that. You have to bring now 5 industry executives. Who are they?
Yeah. I really hate this question. I wanted to reach out to say, do you really have to, my wife and I watched every single season of Survivor. So I love the idea of being on the island. And I guess, the 50th anniversary of Survivor is the next season, and we were talking about last night.
What?
50th season of Survivor. Yeah, season.
But not 50 years, I don't think.
Not 50 years, but 50 seasons of Survivor.
I don't think Jeff Probst is even that old.
Yeah, I know. He looks good. That guy's amazing. We were saying that Jeff has kind of softened up over the years, though. He's much friendlier with the contestants. So number one, I'm bringing Rob Norman. So I don't know if you know Rob. Now retired from WPP, but he was on the board at WildTangent. WPP was an investor in WildTangent back in the day, and Rob is just hilarious. Got a great British sense of humor. I'm definitely bringing him along. He's a storyteller with a great sense of humor. I'm bringing another Brit, which was my boss at EA for years, Peter Moore, who's a bit of a legend in the game industry, but he also went on to be the CEO of Liverpool FC. And, Liverpool, when he was there, won the Champions League, and they also won the EPL, the English Premier League. And pretty much he accomplished almost everything you could with a football club while he was there. But the reason I'm bringing him along is he's absolutely amazing storyteller. I would bring him in for brand meetings, and he was a COO of EA, but had been a marketer at Reebok, or that's where I first met him back in the day. And boy, he can just captivate an audience, not only with the Scouser accent he has from Liverpool, but just the way that he can tell a story is absolutely phenomenal. And then after that, I'm going to grab 3 contestants. Boston Rob. I got to grab Boston Rob from Survivor. And then remember Richard, the first Survivor, the guy who was walking around the island naked? We're hoping he comes back for the...
I think it's the only Survivor I saw.
Yeah.
I have to be honest.
And then Jeff Probst himself. I just think, if I'm going to be on an island, I really want it to be Survivor. So that was my 5.
So what skill from gaming is actually useful on this island?
Well, I think crafting, I don't know if you remember a game called RuneScape.
Yes.
So RuneScape, I think it's revived itself, but back in like the 2005, 2010 arena, back in that vintage, 1 out of every 2 middle schoolers in the US was playing RuneScape. And RuneScape is a game that looks awful. It's pixelated. It's not high fidelity. It was played on a PC. I had to download it. But the whole idea was it was kind of like a crafting and survival mode, and you had to build things. You had to build fires. You had to build shelter. You had to collect runes, and then you could put runes in the fire. And runes were essentially rocks that you could trade for stuff. And I think, to me, that game, and it had just a massive audience, and it was created by 2 brothers north of London, and they ended up selling it for a crazy amount of money. And then one of the brothers was like this, he was kind of a swashbuckling, bachelor who got on a jet ski to raise awareness for global warming, and jet skied across the globe. He did this crazy cross ocean jet ski thing to raise awareness. But the game itself was just still around today. It's now called Original RuneScape, I think. But
Old school
RuneScape, yeah. So that game, probably had all the elements that you would want to learn to survive on an island.
So moving on, you're a passionate outdoorsman. You're family focused, and you're grounded despite decades in corporate chaos. Your humor and candor make you relatable beyond the exec persona. My question for you is, what identity feels most natural? Builder, storyteller, or explorer?
I think builder. If there was one thing I would say that I do pride myself on is not business successes or outcomes so much as just surrounding myself with I've always done a good job of identifying talent and young people that I can help mentor and grow and see their careers flourish. And so I go all the way back to early management roles at Runner's World, and then at News Corp, and then WildTangent, and just look at the people that I've brought on board and what they've gone on to do. And, some of them have done some really incredible outcomes. And I think that's probably what if I had to rank myself, that would be my thing that I'm probably been best at, is identifying and nurturing talent and building teams of people that guarantee are always smarter and better than me and help make me be successful. But also flourish while they're doing it.
So you write a lot about industry absurdities. Is it therapy, rebellion, or a little of both?
Yeah, that's so do you.
It's my therapy. I'm very honest that it's therapeutic.
Yeah, I find it therapeutic. I just find it's therapeutic. I also just like to share knowledge and see all, rising tide floats all boats. And there's a lot of learnings that can benefit. You never want to be the smartest person in the room. You're in the wrong room. But you also don't want to be the only entity chasing an idea or chasing something. You need to push yourself to perform and build things that work and grow and are exciting. You need competition and you need other people doing it. So I think if you have an idea or you have thoughts and you just keep it to yourself, maybe that concept or that industry never really flourishes. So I think sharing is really important. And, I actually try to be really close to competitors and spend time with them and see what we can learn together and grow stuff together as an industry.
What makes you angry about how the world sees gaming? Something like gamers aren't villains, they're just competitive introverts.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the definition of gaming is always so incorrect or maligned. I'm playing Wordle and Strands and a bunch of the New York Times games with every day with David Rubin, who's the chief brand officer at the New York Times, and then Michael Pachter, who's maybe the most famous video games analyst out there. We're texting each other every single day with our Wordle scores and our connection scores and, chirping at one another. And that's
who has the highest score usually?
Pachter's a savant. I don't even know, I don't know how he does it. He gets Wordle in 2 all the time and occasionally in 1, rarely in 4, always by 3. And I'm just and then I'll be like, I don't understand how you could have gotten this one. And he'll send his logic, and he's got this very deep gamification thinking on it. And he's at a different level. Rubin's pretty great too, but he works in the New York Times, so we always accuse him of getting the answers when he has a good round. But that's gaming. That is gaming. It's human nature.
It's co-op in a way too.
Totally.
You guys are doing it through another platform.
It's social. It's co-op. You can play. Wordle New York Times has put their games on Discord. You can jump into Discord channels and play Wordle, which is really cool. Definition of gaming is so broad now that it's hard to imagine that Candy Crush. I used to get up in front of the audience at conferences and say, "Do you play? Raise your hand if you play video games." And when maybe a third of the audience would raise their hands. And then I'd say, okay, how many of you are playing Candy Crush? And 80% of the hands would go, well, that's actually a video game. That's usually an eye-opener for the audience. Oh yeah, I didn't think I was playing a video game, but I guess I am.
Last question, but not the least. When the credits roll, what do you want your life's achievement unlocked to read?
I haven't accomplished at all what I want to yet, but I look at what someone who I view as a real leader in the games business, but also someone I aspire to, achieve outside of business what they do, which is Strauss Zelnick, who's the chairman of Take-Two. And, someone that I look up to. I work out with him when I go to New York. But what he does really well, and he's, very vocal about this, is he'll sit down with young people and talk to them about what their career aspirations and life aspirations are and help them get on track. And this is one of the busiest, most successful entrepreneurs and business people in the world, and he carves out a lot of time for young people to help them with their career trajectory and life trajectory. And I look at that and go, I need to do more of that. I aspire to accomplish even a fraction of what he's doing. But that's when I think I'll feel successful, when I know I've helped other people to some level greater than I am today.
Now the fun part is where we force ADOTAT executives to dance.
No, do that. All right, let's cut it now.
Thanks again to Dave Madden, who didn't just give us anecdotes, he gave us the whole playbook. Cloud gaming without the hype, rewarded ads without the nonsense, Titanfall launches that could have ended in retail disaster, and a brutally honest reminder that innovation only matters when it actually works. Huge thanks to our sponsors, Troutman and Min, for keeping this industry legally awake, and incremental.com for proving that incrementality is measurable reality, not a marketing pasha.